Hey guys, tonight we drift back, farther back than most bedtime stories dare go. The air is dry, the light dim, and you're lying under a sky the color of fired clay, somewhere in the vast silence between the Tigris and the Zagros mountains. The wind stirs dust into your lungs. You squint, blink. It's hard to breathe. You're not in modern Iran yet. You're in something older, a place before maps, before borders. The Bible opens like a whispered chant. And there it is, Elam, a name buried deep in Genesis, older than any bedtime story you've ever heard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Blank. Underscore. Blank. You find yourself in a settlement made of mud brick. The kind that leaves fine dust between your teeth just from breathing. Around you, goats bleat drowsily, and reeds rustle where water used to flow. The city isn't Susa yet, it's something smaller. Quieter. The name Elam floats in the air like incense smoke. The book of Genesis names it alongside Babel and Assyria, as if it's always been part of the backdrop. You hear it in the verse, the sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, a roll call of ancient names like stones thrown into an endless canyon. This is where the biblical link to Iran begins, not with prophecy or miracles, but with a genealogy. You, sleepy traveler, are already tangled in the ancient family tree. The land is hot and restless. You feel it under your feet, dry, cracked, and full of secrets. Even now, the soil coughs up clues. Inscriptions in Elamite script carved into black stone. Beads from burials, echoes of a people older than the Persians themselves. The fringe detail? Their language still hasn't been fully decoded. Some words remain a mystery. Like ancient whispers no one has quite translated. You wonder if one of them might have meant hope, or empire, or simply dust. Scholars argue endlessly whether Elam had a major cultural impact on early Israelite writings, or if their mention in Genesis is a distant nod to geopolitical memory. It's like spotting an old acquaintance in a blurry photograph. Was he really there? Or is it just someone who looked familiar? Still, you walk the silent courtyards of Proto-Susa, your feet brushing pottery shards as if you've time traveled into the Bible's footnotes. A priest in linen chants softly nearby, and you don't understand the words, but the rhythm pulls you in. It's mesmerizing. You pause by a wall and place your hand on sun-warmed stone. The roughness bites your palm, a reminder you're not in a dream. But close enough. The Elamites weren't Israelites. They worshipped different gods, fought different wars, but they were neighbors. That matters. In the ancient world, neighbors meant war, or trade, or sometimes both before breakfast. You sit by a well and breathe in deeply. The water smells of copper and earth. Your knees creak as you shift. The heat has made everything swell, even your joints. A woman walks past carrying a clay jar on her head, and you notice the same symbol you saw on the stela earlier. Maybe it's a god. Maybe just a good luck charm. Either way, it's survived thousands of years better than most of us. In this dusty dawn of civilization, the Bible isn't a book yet, it's a memory. A thread being spun slowly, like wool on a drop spindle, passed from mouth to mouth, generation to generation. The mention of Elam may be brief, but like a sand grain in your sandal, it's not easily ignored. The sun starts to rise higher, and your shadow shortens. You follow the scent of baked barley, carried on a dry breeze, toward the market stalls. They're primitive, but alive. Fish drying on racks, spices laid out like a painter's palette. The sensory overload is real. You blink, overwhelmed. The smell of cumin is sharp enough to make you sneeze, as your feet carry you through the bustling noise. You overhear a caravan trader speaking about a people far to the west, Yehud. He calls them. It sounds familiar. Like Judah. Like the people who will one day write the book that mentions Elam as a player in their divine drama. And then, just as the sun begins to beat down harder, you find a small stone slab tucked behind a shrine. It's inscribed with cuneiform, cracked with age. You run your fingers along it. It feels like Braille for the forgotten. One phrase translates loosely to, Elam stands alone but watches all. The irony? No one remembers what else the stone says. Not even the experts. You sit down on a crumbling step. The stone warming your back. It's quiet now. The rush of the morning has faded. And you feel the stillness settle over you like a blanket. Your eyelids droop. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the age of the place. Either way, you're lulled into the sense that history is more like a dream than a timeline. But just as you start to drift, just as your body begins to soften into the stone, a trumpet echoes faintly from across the plain. War drums. Movement. Something's coming. The kingdom of Elam, it turns out, isn't just a whisper in Genesis. It's about to march into biblical memory with bronze on its fists and fire in its eyes. And you, traveler, are standing right in its dusty path. The sound is unmistakable, bronze striking bronze. A rhythmic clatter like a heartbeat made of metal. You lift your head, eyelids heavy with dust and drowsiness. To see them crest the horizon. Warriors of Elam, not like Roman legionnaires or Persian immortals, no. These men are rougher around the edges. Their armor is mismatched, their banners worn, but they move like they've done this 1,000 times. A march born not of elegance, but survival. You shift to your feet, your legs protesting with a dull ache. The earth trembles faintly as they pass. You smell the sweat, the leather, the metallic tang of blood not yet spilled. These are the sons of Elam, and though most modern Bibles barely pause on them, right now they are the loudest sound in the world. The book of Genesis places Elam as a son of Shem, but by the time history starts keeping better records, Elam is a kingdom all its own, nestled in what will one day be southwestern Iran, a land of mountains and marshes, of gods with names you can barely pronounce, and kings who scribbled their deeds in clay. One of those deeds? War. Lots of it, including the earliest recorded military alliance in human history. Yeah. Really. You're watching the events of Genesis chapter 14 unfold, where 4 kings from the east, including Chedorlaomer of Elam, form a kind of Mesopotamian NATO and invade Canaan. The biblical story is brief but wild. These kings sweep down like a sandstorm, stomping out rebellion and collecting spoils. They even take Lot, yes, that Lot, Abraham's nephew, as a hostage. And suddenly Abraham, usually known for sheep and quiet chats with God, grabs a sword and goes full action hero, rescuing Lot and scattering the Eastern Alliance like pigeons in a market. Your body tenses at the thought, Abraham, usually so serene, now riding into battle? But scholars still argue whether this tale is historical or heavily dramatized. Did this alliance really exist? Or is it a mythic echo of Eastern raids the Israelites once feared? Still, the Elamites, whoever they were, played a starring role. And right now, as you trail behind their column, you see why. They're organized, hardened, their weapons are brutal and simple. The air smells of hot metal and sun-baked armor. The noise of marching becomes hypnotic, like a lullaby for warriors. A young soldier near you adjusts his tunic, scratched and sweat-stained, the same scratchy fabric you felt earlier, clinging to skin like damp parchment. You hear him mutter a prayer, not to Yahweh, but to a god of war whose name survives only in half-erased tablets. Still, his voice trembles like yours might before an exam or a first date. Some things never change. As they pass a small village, people scatter, chickens shriek, children duck behind doors. You smell fear in the air, sharp and sour, like turned milk. The soldiers take only what they need: grain, water, perhaps a goat. But the message is clear. Elam is not to be trifled with. Not by Babylon, not by Canaan, and certainly not by some distant shepherd named Abraham. The fringe detail? Chedorlaomer's name has never been found in any known Elamite record. None. Zero. Zilch. His title in the Bible is King of Elam. But outside that, he's a ghost. Some historians suggest he may have been a general, not a king. Others wonder if he's a composite of several Eastern rulers, a narrative shortcut in a time when storytelling was more important than strict accuracy. You crouch behind a low wall as the army stops to rest. Fires flicker to life, and the smell of roasting meat makes your stomach growl. A soldier tosses a bone to a stray dog, who snatches it midair with a dusty growl. You notice the quiet now: no drums, no chants, just tired men leaning against stone, staring into the flames. One carves a mark into the dirt with his knife. A circle, then a line through it. You don't know if it's a map or a memory. Maybe both. The next morning, you wake to the sound of shouting. A scout has returned. Something about a rebellion. A city that refuses tribute. The men groan, stand, stretch. Their backs pop audibly. Your own spine gives a sympathetic creak. And off they go again. The sun is barely up, and already the road ahead glows with heat. You walk behind them, the soles of your feet now toughened from miles of sand and stone. You hear whispers, stories about the Westerners they fight, men who worship a single invisible God, who circumcise their children and leave food uneaten for reasons no Elamite quite understands. There's tension, even curiosity, not hatred, not yet, just confusion. You think of how it must have felt for the Israelites, hearing that distant thunder from the east. Wondering what these eastern kings wanted. Wondering if Elam would come again. And then, just as quickly as it started, the army fades into the horizon. Dust hangs in the air. Slow to settle, you stand alone on the road. Your ears still ringing. The stone under your feet is warm again. Your lips are cracked. You taste salt. Maybe from the sweat. Maybe from tears you didn't notice. You sit on a half-buried milestone and rest your head in your hands. For a moment, nothing moves. You're not in a Bible story anymore. You're in its shadow. But just as you begin to breathe again, just as your heartbeat steadies, a soft whisper of silk catches your ear. The scent of rosewater and ink floats past. You lift your eyes, and there, walking toward the sun-drenched gates of a palace, is a woman in royal robes. A queen, a Persian queen. The Elamites are gone, but Susa remains, and in its halls, a story is beginning, one that will twist the fate of an entire people. You brush the sand from your sleeves and follow the shimmer of silk into the heart of the city, Susa. Once Elamite, now Persian, always layered like the rings of a tree trunk. The buildings rise around you, pale stone veined with blue tile, windows framed in carved cedar. But it's the palace that steals your breath. The air cools inside, finally, like walking into a cave with walls that remember the prayers of kings. You hear the faint slap of sandals against polished floors. Servants shuffle past, heads low, the scent of myrrh and crushed dates lingering in their wake. You tug at your tunic, still that same scratchy thing, and try not to look too out of place. This is not a quiet corner of scripture. This is the book of Esther, the most Persian part of the Bible, a story that doesn't once mention God directly, yet pulses with divine timing. A story drenched in silk and wine and danger. You find yourself standing among pillars carved like giant lilies, each one wide enough to lean your full weight against. Your feet ache, so you do. The stone is cold through your tunic, a relief against your tired back. Across the hall, Esther enters. You don't see her face yet, but you see the ripple she creates. Guards straighten, maids pause, even the air shifts, heavy with tension. This is the moment, the one where she walks, unsummoned, into the throne room of King Xerxes. Risking everything, her people's fate balanced like a bowl of wine too full to carry safely. It's hard to imagine the courage it took, especially when you remember she was once just a girl, a Jewish orphan named Hadassah, plucked from obscurity, perfumed for a year, and placed into a royal contest more cutthroat than any reality TV show. And she won, or lost, depending how you see it. You walk slowly behind her. The hall seems to stretch forever. The floor is a checkerboard of marble so polished you can see your face, grimy. Wide-eyed, your knees ache again, though you're not sure from walking or from holding your breath. And then, finally, the king sees her. No wrath, no exile. He lifts his golden scepter. She's safe. For now. You exhale. Your heart has been beating too loudly in your ears. Even the nearby guards seem to relax. The sound of their armor shifting like wind chimes made of metal. Esther approaches, and history turns with her steps. Historians still debate how much of the Book of Esther is fact, fiction, or a brilliantly coded piece of political survival literature. There's no extra biblical record of Queen Esther. No mention of Haman's twisted plot or Mordecai's refusal to bow. But Susa was real. The Persian court was real. And Jewish communities in exile? Absolutely real, and scared. Some scholars argue Esther was a literary mirror, a defiant fable for Jews living under foreign rule. Reminding them, you are seen. You are strong. You are not forgotten. As you trail Esther down the corridor, you think of how alien this setting must have been for her. Golden goblets, eunuchs with kohl-rimmed eyes, feasts that last 180 days, yes, you heard that right, 180 days of banquets. Your stomach churns at the thought, but not from hunger. It's all too much, too rich, too fragile. You duck into a side hallway where the servants whisper stories. One of them, an older woman with hands like sandpaper, tells you Haman strutted through these very halls. Drunk on power and sweet wine, plotting genocide over dinner. The tension still hangs here. The walls remember. Outside, a breeze slips through carved shutters, and the scent of citrus blossoms rides in. Soft and unexpected, you feel it in your chest. Something loosening. The threat has passed. Haman is gone. Esther's people are safe, for now. But there's a strange twist. The story ends not with rescue, but with revenge. A royal decree lets the Jews strike their enemies. And the bloodshed is sharp and sudden. It leaves a complicated aftertaste. Victory, yes, but at a cost. You step out into the garden. The sun warms your shoulders. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs, free and oblivious. A bird rustles in a fig tree overhead. You wonder if Esther ever stood here. After all the feasting, all the fear, all the fate-defying steps. Did she ever just breathe and let herself be a person? Not a queen, not a savior? That's the part the Bible doesn't say. Maybe because it didn't know. Or maybe because, in moments like this, the details become yours to imagine. And just as you close your eyes to picture her, barefoot in the dew, hair unbound, a trumpet call shatters the stillness. Not the war kind, the royal kind, a new king, a new age. The Persians are just getting started. And this next one? He's about to do something no one expected. He's going to send the Jews home. You stir as the sound of hoofbeats approaches, not fast, not frantic, steady, ceremonial. And when you lift your head, blinking against the rising light, you see the silhouette of a chariot, polished wood, gleaming gold, draped in purple cloth that catches the wind like a sail. And there, standing tall beneath a parasol held by a quiet attendant, is Cyrus the Great, not in a crown, not surrounded by fanfare, just standing, watching, calm as stone, but with eyes that seem to scan the entire horizon. Your knees protest as you rise again. The cobblestones beneath your feet are warm from the morning sun, and the scent of fresh-cut cedar wafts through the palace gardens behind you. Susa has not changed. Not really. But the air feels different now. Lighter, like something has shifted underfoot. Cyrus doesn't speak to you directly, he wouldn't. Not because he's cruel, but because he doesn't need to. His presence carries the weight of decision, of proclamation, and soon, from the steps of his throne, he does just that. The decree isn't shouted, it's read, slowly, clearly, in multiple languages. Just to be sure, the Jews may return to Jerusalem. A whisper at first, then murmurs, then the sound of weeping, quiet, shocked, sunlit weeping, the kind that comes when hope has been gone for so long you'd forgotten what it tasted like. Your chest tightens, not from sadness, from something deeper, that kind of ancient, bone-level ache that comes from watching something unthinkable finally happen. This isn't just history, this is scripture. The book of Ezra records it like a miracle. A Persian king, the king of a people who worship fire and stars, calls Yahweh the God of Israel, his God, or at least, acknowledges his hand. Scholars still argue over that phrasing. Was Cyrus truly monotheistic? Was he just playing politics? Did he believe in Yahweh, or was he simply wise enough to respect the gods of those he governed? You'll never know for sure. But standing there, in that garden full of jasmine and sword-bearing guards, you can feel something ancient crack open. It's worth noting, the Hebrew Bible refers to Cyrus as Messiah. That's not casual language, it means anointed one. It's a title reserved for kings and priests and holy rescues. And here it is, given to a Persian emperor with no Israelite blood, no Torah education, no covenant, just a heart and a policy wide enough to let the captives go home. You step into the crowd now. Elbows brush yours, shoulders tremble beside you. The man next to you clutches a scroll so tightly it might disintegrate. You smell ink, sweat, and something sweet. Pomegranates? Maybe figs. Someone has started packing already. They were never truly unpacked. This return isn't mandatory. Some won't go. They've built lives here in exile. Children, trades, graves. But for others, this is the moment they've dreamed of for 70 years. Or longer. A scribe with a sharp jawline and heavy eyelids walks past you, muttering something about temple vessels. Yes, those vessels. The ones Nebuchadnezzar stole from Solomon's temple before leveling it like a kicked-over toy. Cyrus has ordered them returned. Every goblet, every bowl, every lamp. You trail behind the carts as they load them carefully. One by one, each piece is wrapped in cloth, cradled like a newborn. These aren't just objects. They're memory, identity. They are the pieces of a home that was never truly abandoned, only postponed. Somewhere behind you, Persian guards grumble about logistics. A few mutter in Old Persian, others in Elamite. One jokes, lightly, that the Jews are getting royal treatment. The other shrugs. Better to send them happy than keep them angry. The politics of empire, reduced to common sense. But beneath that pragmatism is something rare. Tolerance. You don't see it often in ancient texts. And here, it stands in the open like a stone altar under a blue sky. Cyrus believed people would be more loyal if they were allowed to worship freely. Radical, right? In a world of forced conversions and empire-wide assimilation. He chose something quieter, smarter, human. You pass a group of women loading jars into baskets. One of them hums, a lullaby. Maybe, or a prayer. The melody sticks with you. It sounds older than the language you speak. Like it could slip into Genesis without anyone noticing. The fringe detail? Archaeologists uncovered the Cyrus cylinder in Babylon, a clay barrel-shaped object inscribed with cuneiform. It doesn't mention the Jews specifically, but it describes Cyrus's policy of restoring temples and returning exiles. Some call it the first charter of human rights. Others say that's a stretch, but the alignment with Ezra's account is eerie. As the caravan begins to move, the dust rises again. You cover your mouth with your sleeve. That same dry, bitter dust, always watching, always reminding. Your feet ache, but you walk anyway. The city fades behind you, the palace shrinking to a memory. Before you lies a journey of weeks, maybe months, across rivers, mountains, burned towns and old dreams. But you don't feel fear, just resolve. Cyrus does not watch you go. He's already moved on to other affairs, taxes, rebellions, more borders to manage, but you know he's changed history, maybe even touched the edge of prophecy. The sun is setting now, painting the sky with strokes of copper and smoke. Your sandals hit gravel, and then soil, and then nothing, just a soft hush, like the breath of the earth itself. And in that hush, a voice like Isaiah's might echo. He says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd. He shall perform all my pleasure." You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The wind is cooler now, a welcome break from the day's heat. You glance back one last time, Susa glowing golden behind you, and then forward again, toward the shadows. And just as you begin to settle into the rhythm of the road, just as your muscles begin to sync with the sway of the caravan, a temple rises in your imagination, not yet built, but already burning in the hearts of those returning. The road home is long. It snakes through dry ravines and thorny scrub, beneath skies so wide they seem to peel the very thoughts from your skull. Your knees complain again, stubborn and creaky, but there's a rhythm to this journey, feet crunching gravel, carts creaking under sacred burdens, voices murmuring prayers older than empires. And still, your mind circles one strange idea. How did this happen? A Persian king, not just tolerating the Jews, but helping them, and not quietly, boldly, publicly. The Bible doesn't just mention Cyrus. It praises him, and in the scroll of Isaiah, written long before Cyrus was even born, you find something even stranger. He's called God's anointed. You feel a shiver, not from the wind, which is hot and dry, but from the sheer weirdness of it. A Gentile king, a Zoroastrian, called Messiah by a Jewish prophet. If you're blinking in confusion, you're not alone. Scholars still debate whether Isaiah chapter 45 was written before Cyrus's decree or after, if the prophecy predicted the man, or if the man inspired the prophecy. Either way, you're walking in his shadow, and it's long. You pass a shepherd guiding goats through a valley that smells like wild thyme and old fire. He nods as you walk by, then returns to singing something in a language you almost understand. Every few miles, someone joins your caravan, a boy with a harp, a woman with calloused hands and silent eyes, a scribe dragging a cart full of scrolls wrapped in wool. They all say the same thing, in different ways. We're going home. But what does home even mean now? Jerusalem has been rubble for decades, its temple a memory, the land filled with strangers and sadness. But for the people of the book, it's not about what's standing, it's about what will be rebuilt. The book of Ezra paints this moment with quiet awe. You can almost hear the soft scratching of stylus on parchment as it records the names of those returning. The items restored, the priests reappointed. There's order, structure, lists upon lists, the kind of bureaucratic poetry only a deeply traumatized nation could find comforting. But there's also something else, something raw. When the foundation of the new temple is finally laid, the people gather, the young sing with joy. But the elders? They weep, loudly. You stand at the edge of the crowd. The stone is still damp from the morning dew, though the sun already warms your shoulders. You hear both sounds at once, singing and sobbing, twisting into each other like incense and smoke. Some are looking forward, others are trapped in memory. The Bible doesn't ask you to choose. It simply records both. A man beside you wipes his eyes with the sleeve of his robe. It's not what it was, he says. His voice cracks. But it's something. Then he smiles, just a little, and returns to laying bricks. You notice your feet are dirty again. The kind of caked in dirt that only comes from pilgrimage. Your hands, too. are stained with soil and ash from helping stack stones or tend fires. You feel like a figure from one of the Psalms, half exile, half mason. But don't get too comfortable, because this story isn't smooth. Opposition brews, not from Persia, but from within the land. The neighbors of the returning exiles, people who've lived in Judah during the exile, offer to help build the temple. The response? A hard no. Tensions rise. Letters fly back and forth to Persia, and for a while, construction halts altogether. Historians still wrestle with the politics of it. Was it ethnocentrism? Legitimate fear? A way to preserve identity after decades in a foreign land? Or all three? Either way, it's not the triumphant return you might have imagined. It's muddy, contested, human. You sit beside the half-finished foundation, watching dust curl in lazy spirals as builders argue about measurements. One man insists on a specific width for the altar. Another grumbles that they don't have enough timber. A priest, young and red-eyed from lack of sleep, quietly blesses the stones already in place. The scene feels unfinished, but alive. You turn, and there, walking up the slope with that same worn scroll tucked under his arm, is Ezra. Not a warrior, not a prophet with fire in his eyes. Just a scholar, a scribe, but the kind of man who reshapes nations with ink, not swords. He doesn't raise his voice. He reads the Torah aloud, voice trembling, eyes fierce. And the people? They weep again. This time not from loss, but from recognition, from the ache of remembering what they forgot. It's one of the Bible's most cinematic moments, a public reading of sacred law. The crowd falling to their knees, the words echoing across the ruined city like rain on dry soil. A child leans against you, whispering questions you don't know how to answer. What's a covenant? Why did we leave? Will God come back? You just place your hand on their head, gently, and watch Ezra raise his arms, blessing a people learning to breathe again. But just as peace starts to settle, just as the temple begins to hum with sacrifices and song, something new stirs in the wind. You smell spices, cinnamon, frankincense, something foreign. You hear the distant sound of laughter, not local, not familiar. And when you look up, the hills shimmer with travelers, merchants, magi, riders from the far east. The Jews have returned to their land, but others are coming too, bringing not just goods, but questions and prophecies. They come in quiet processions, slow-moving and deliberate, camels with tasseled saddles, their hooves sinking softly into the sun-bleached dust. You hear bells clinking gently from their bridles, like wind chimes stirred by ancient breath. The men who lead them wear long robes, dyed in deep indigo and crimson, stitched with patterns older than any flag. Their faces are shaded, unreadable. Their eyes scan the horizon like those who follow signs not in letters, but in stars. You smell something rich before you even see them. Frankincense, myrrh, resin that clings to cloth and skin like memory. They speak in a language you don't recognize, but their laughter is light and musical, curling in the air like smoke from a distant fire. They're not here to trade. They're seekers. You sit at the edge of a market square where the dust rises in slow spirals and the past never really settles. Ezra is gone now, back to his scrolls. The temple hums with ritual again. But something is changing in the atmosphere, an almost electric sense that another story is forming just out of reach. The Bible doesn't say much about Persia after Ezra and Nehemiah. The narrative shifts. Centuries pass in the white space between testaments. But Persia doesn't disappear. It lingers, like smoke in a garment. And one day, it returns. Not in war chariots or royal decrees, but with a star. The Gospel of Matthew opens like a door creaking at midnight. Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" Your ears perk up. Magi? From the east? Historians connect the dots with cautious ink. Persia, by this point, has seen the rise and fall of empires. The Parthians now rule, fierce and clever, but the Zoroastrian priesthood, those magi, still thrive. Learned men, star watchers, keepers of flame and lore. And perhaps, just perhaps, among them are those who read something unusual in the skies. You imagine them climbing hills outside Ecbatana or Persepolis, squinting into the black velvet sky, whispering over strange alignments, bright stars that don't belong. A comet, maybe, or something subtler, a pattern they alone recognize. And somehow, it leads them west. You feel the tremble in your knees again as the dust clears and you realize what you're witnessing. Persian wise men riding toward Bethlehem. Toward a manger. Toward a child wrapped in worn cloth. No throne in sight. They didn't know the full story. Not yet, but they followed the signs anyway. One of the camels passes close to where you sit. The beast snorts, and you flinch as a bit of spit lands on your sleeve. Still that same tunic. Still scratchy. Still stubborn. The magi don't notice you. But one of them drops something as he passes, small, metallic. You pick it up, a coin, smooth and oddly warm. The inscription is not Hebrew, not Roman, it's Eastern, possibly Parthian. The fringe detail? Some scholars argue these wise men weren't just curious mystics but political agents, emissaries from the Parthian court, subtly challenging Rome by honoring a rival king. The tension? Delicious. Herod panics. The court trembles. And the Bible records it in just a few verses, quiet, understated, full of consequence. You follow the riders in your mind. Though they disappear over a ridge, the road turns silver in the moonlight, like thread pulled tight through a dark cloak. They will reach the child. They will bow, and then they will vanish from the text, like smoke leaving a chimney. But the idea lingers, that Persians, those same descendants of Elamites and Zoroastrians and empire makers, were among the first to recognize something divine in a Hebrew child. You lie back on a cool stone ledge, your muscles finally giving in. Above you, the stars blink slowly, patiently, like eyes that never sleep. You think about that eastern sky again, and how many stories it must have hidden, how many dreams it launched, how many people, in forgotten towns, looked up and found meaning. Your breath slows. The sandalwood scent of the magi still hangs faint in the air. Your fingers toy with the coin in your hand. A tiny, circular link between faiths, nations, prophecies. And just as your eyelids begin to drift close, just as the night tucks itself around you like a cloak, you hear footsteps on sand. Not regal, not mysterious. Faster, urgent. Someone is preaching in the distance. Not in temples, not among scrolls, but out in the hills, in the dust, in the wind. A voice calling out in strange lands, carrying eastward, and the people beyond the rivers are beginning to listen. The voice cuts through the dust like a blade through linen, sharp, startling, and somehow familiar. You're on the edge of a narrow road now. One of those winding desert paths that seem to unspool forever across ochre hills. A faint echo follows each word, carried by the wind like the memory of a storm. Someone is shouting about repentance, about kingdoms, about something new being born from something ancient. But this isn't Judea, not anymore. You're deep into the land that once belonged to Babylon, now governed by the Persians, and under the shadow of their great cities, Seleucia, Ctesiphon, Ecbatana, cities where spices trade hands faster than stories, and where religions bump elbows like merchants in a crowded bazaar. Your sandals crunch on pebbles as you follow the trail. Around you, shrubs twist in the dry wind, their branches like bony fingers clawing at the heat. The sun sits heavy on your shoulders, pressing your tunic into your spine. You tug at the fabric, still scratchy, still stubborn, and mutter something under your breath that's probably unprintable in biblical Aramaic. Eventually, the trail opens into a wide valley, and there, among clusters of date palms and baked mud homes, is a gathering, Not large, not loud, but focused. People crowd in around a man with wild hair and a voice like dry thunder. He speaks of change, of preparation, of paths made straight, but your focus slips. Behind him, quiet, almost unnoticed, another figure waits. Calm, composed, listening more than speaking. You feel something shift again. This isn't just the story of Judea. It's spilling eastward now, across the old Persian Empire. The early Christians will not stay within the boundaries of the Levant. They will walk, they will write, and eventually, they will reach even here. You trail behind that quiet man for a time. The road dips. The landscape changes. Rivers appear where you least expect them, flanked by willows and poplars that whisper like gossiping elders. You pass villages where the names sound like songs and where people greet you with cautious eyes. Some wear robes like the Magi. Others wear nothing but a cloth at the waist and a skeptical frown. And then, you find them. Christians, early ones, fragile as saplings, stubborn as weeds, gathered in secret beneath low ceilings or inside quiet caves. Some speak Greek, others Parthian. Some pray like Jews, others with gestures you don't quite recognize. One man hums a hymn that seems older than the very cave it echoes in. Another reads from a scroll by torchlight, the flicker making the letters seem alive. They are not powerful, not yet, but their belief radiates heat, low, steady, like embers. You crouch beside a young girl, no older than 12, drawing fish symbols in the dust. She explains, without looking up, that her parents were followers too, but were taken by soldiers for worshipping wrong. Her voice doesn't tremble when she says it. It's too normal now. Her hands keep drawing. The fringe detail? Historical records mention Christian communities in Persia as early as the 1st and 2nd centuries. Some scholars suggest that Thomas, the disciple, traveled east of Mesopotamia, perhaps even reaching India. Whether that's true is debated, of course. But someone brought the story here. And it stuck. You feel the chill of the cave seep into your bones. Your back aches. The dirt beneath you is cool. But your knees throb. A young man passes you a cup, lukewarm goat's milk. You sip it anyway. It's sour, but strangely soothing. Your body doesn't thank you. But it also doesn't complain. There's tension in this little group. You sense it. The air is tight. Rome is watching. Persia is watching. And the Christians here are caught in the squeeze. Too Jewish for the Greeks. Too Greek for the Jews. Too confusing for everyone else. But still, they sing. In whispers. They break bread. They tell the story. And beyond the cave walls, Persia watches. You climb a ridge later that night, letting the dry wind scrub your face clean. The stars overhead are the same ones the Magi watched. The same ones Abraham counted. The same ones Cyrus ruled beneath. And you wonder, if the constellations ever whisper to each other, what would they say about these strange new people in hidden caves? Below, a fire flickers, not large, just enough to warm bread and hands. A man wraps his cloak tighter, then reaches for a parchment. He reads aloud in a language that once echoed in Jerusalem. But now, it dances in the valleys of Iran. And just as your eyes begin to close, just as your body sinks into the slope of the hill, you hear footsteps again. More voices. Not enemies. Not yet. But the empire is shifting. And faith, once whispered, is about to echo louder. The wind wakes you first, hot and dry, smelling faintly of ash and saffron. You sit up slowly, bones stiff from the uneven ground. Your tunic bunched beneath you like a stubborn old dog. Below the ridge, smoke curls from a caravan stop nestled beside the ruins of an old Zoroastrian temple. Its white stone is cracked but still proud, with carvings that shimmer faintly in the dawn. You make your way down, boots kicking pebbles that skitter like loose thoughts. A merchant waves you over. He offers dried apricots and thick bread smeared with something sticky and sweet. Honey, Maybe. Or fermented fig. You nod gratefully. Eat slowly. Listen. Around you, voices trade not just goods, but scripture. Not always from the same book. This is the Silk Road. But it's not the version you've seen on maps. This one feels more like a bloodstream, pulsing with ideas, creeds, gossip, and prophecy. A crossroad of spice and scroll, where Greek letters brush shoulders with Aramaic script, and half-whispered verses pass between hands like contraband. You're in Parthian territory now, somewhere between Seleucia and Merv. Though the borders are fluid, more suggestion than certainty. And while the empires clash above, something else is happening below. You hear it in the way traders talk. How one quotes Jesus with the same casual certainty another uses to reference Zoroaster. How an old woman carries both a cross and a fire temple amulet around her neck. And no one questions it. Not here. Inside a rest stop carved into a hill. You duck from the sun and find a gathering of scribes. Their fingers stained with ink. Their beards flecked with dust and dried fruit crumbs. One reads from a scroll in Syriac, a dialect that tastes like both Aramaic and honey, and you realize the text is the Gospel of Matthew. He reads slowly, reverently. Others copy. One mutters corrections under his breath. They're translating, line by line, into Persian, not the courtly dialect, not the language of kings, but the common tongue of traders and weavers and stubborn grandmothers. And just like that, the word travels. You sit near the back, legs outstretched, sipping tea so bitter it tightens your jaw. But it wakes you, keeps you alert as the scribe pauses and points to a particular line, love your enemies. The room falls into thoughtful silence. One man chuckles under his breath. Try that with a Roman tax collector, he says. The others laugh, but gently. You smile too, the corners of your mouth dry and cracked. Historians still debate just how far Christianity spread through Persia this early. Some argue the real push came later, under the Sassanids. Others insist there were communities here before Rome even realized it had a religious problem. But the evidence? It's quietly persistent. Graves inscribed with crosses. Syriac manuscripts buried in desert libraries. Frescoes tucked behind pagan mosaics. Christianity traveled east, not with fanfare, but with foot blisters and second-hand scrolls. And here on the Silk Road, it mingled with Zoroastrian fire worship, Buddhist chants, and Jewish liturgy like ingredients in a stew too rich to name. A young boy walks by with a small clay lamp, the flame flickering in the half-dark room. You follow the glow with your eyes and think about the old Zoroastrian temples, their eternal flames. Fire that never dies, kindled again and again by hands long dead. The parallels aren't lost on you. Light, word, memory, the elements might differ, but the yearning feels the same. Later, as dusk bleeds into the sky, you step outside. The cold hits first, dry, sharp, unforgiving. But it clears your head. You walk toward a small shrine built against the mountain wall. It's humble, crude, even, but above the door, someone has carved a cross and, below it, a fire altar. No one seems confused by the juxtaposition. Inside, a single oil lamp flickers. A man kneels. He recites something quietly, not the Lord's Prayer, but close, adapted, maybe, blended. You close your eyes and listen. You begin to feel it in your bones, how faith moves here. Less concerned with dogma, more like water through cracked stone, finding its way, becoming part of the rock without losing its flow. The fringe detail? Ancient Nestorian inscriptions have been found as far east as China, carved in stone, full of Syriac prayers and crosses with Persian design motifs. Evidence that believers made it not only past Persia, but into the very heart of Asia. And here, on this narrow stretch of earth between sunburnt rock and sky-blotting stars, you understand why. Because faith here isn't a system. It's a companion. You turn to leave, your fingers brushing the doorframe, splintered wood. still warm from the sun's kiss. Outside, the stars begin to stitch their quiet patterns overhead. You recognize none of them, and yet you trust them. The path ahead curves into night. You walk slowly. Let the coolness wrap around your ankles. Let the road stretch before you like a scroll waiting to be read. And just as you think the night has settled, just as you begin to believe the next village will offer nothing more than rest, you hear singing, soft, distant, echoing across the ravine, not in Greek, not in Persian, but in Aramaic. Your ears know the lilt. The old prayers have found new mouths, and the journey is far from over. The singing fades behind you, replaced by the low clop of your sandals on stone, soft, rhythmic, and steady as your own heartbeat. The night wraps tighter now, thick as velvet. You pass through a cleft in the hills and descend into a valley veiled in shadows. Crickets trill in uneven rhythms, and from somewhere far off, a jackal lets out a yip that sounds like a question with no answer. You're headed toward Susa again, or what remains of it. This place keeps drawing you back, not because it's beautiful, though it is, in a sun-bleached, bone and bronze kind of way, but because so much began here, and some of it never ended. A lone lantern swings gently from a doorframe as you step into the courtyard of a scriptorium, half temple, half library, and all dust. The light throws long shadows over carved lintels, and the scent of ink and beeswax wraps around you like a forgotten blanket. It's warm, familiar, oddly comforting. Inside, the air is still, thick with the breath of parchment and whispered prayer. A scribe, his beard wiry, his robe patched, bends over a scroll. His hands shake slightly, but the letters don't suffer. They flow in deliberate curls, like water winding around stones. You sit cross-legged nearby, rubbing your thighs absent-mindedly. They're sore. Always are these days. He doesn't look up, but he knows you're there. He keeps writing, murmuring to himself in an ancient tongue. You catch fragments of Hebrew, then Aramaic, then Persian, and that's when it hits you. You're watching the Bible come together. Not all at once, not in thunderbolts and voices from the clouds, but quietly, through calluses, through translation, through ink that smudges if the scribe breathes too hard. This scriptorium, like others hidden throughout Persia, is where Jewish scribes in exile preserved, organized, and recompiled the texts we now call the Old Testament. It's not a romantic process. It's repetition, recitation, reverence in lowercase. The man across from you is copying a psalm. You recognize the rhythm, by the rivers of Babylon. There we sat and wept. He pauses, scratches his ear, then continues. The fringe detail? Scholars believe much of the Hebrew Bible reached its final form during the exile and post-exilic period, meaning outside of Judah, in lands like Babylon and Persia. The trauma of displacement pressed the stories into permanence. The need to remember created the need to write. Your legs fall asleep, tingling like angry bees. So you shift. The scribe glances at you now. Not unkindly, just curious, as if wondering whether you've come to copy or simply listen. A boy enters with a jug of water. He sets it down without a word and vanishes again, the door creaking softly behind him. You pour a small cup, the rim chipped but clean, and sip. It tastes faintly of copper and clay. Above you, shelves sag under the weight of texts, some cracked and faded, others crisp with recent ink. There are scrolls of the prophets, worn fragments of the Torah, copies of royal edicts, preserved for reference or resistance. One bundle is wrapped in linen and sealed with wax. You don't touch it. It feels sacred, even if you don't know why. Outside, the wind stirs again, brushing sand across the threshold. A soft voice from the other room begins chanting, slow, rhythmic, nasal, a practice reading, a ritual, a breath passed from one generation to the next. You step outside, let your eyes adjust to the moonlight. The stars have shifted positions since you last looked up. like scribes rearranging constellations for better syntax. The night is quiet, save for the whisper of wind against stone. And just then, you think of Ezra again, of Nehemiah, of Daniel, of the men who carried scrolls through foreign lands, who wrote by oil lamp light, who pressed words into papyrus not just for memory, but for survival. The Bible is not a neat anthology. It's a living document born of fire, exile, debate, and dusty rooms like this one. And Persia, this land of whispers and wide skies, was its womb for longer than most people realize. You hear a door open behind you. The old scribe steps out, arms crossed, eyes heavy. He looks at the moon, then at you. "Will you help tomorrow?" he asks softly. In broken Greek, you nod before thinking, because yes, you will. But before tomorrow comes, he gestures to another door, small, half hidden. You follow. Inside is a single table. Upon it, one open scroll, and beside it, a copy being made in careful, exact strokes. The text is Ezra. The man is translating it into Persian. You lean over and read silently. He has put it into the king's heart to adorn the house of the Lord. You exhale slowly. The air is dry, but in your lungs, it feels rich, full. You help straighten the parchment. Your fingers feel clumsy next to his. But he doesn't mind. You work in silence, side by side. Two strangers in a land that once exiled your ancestors but now shelters your story. And just as your eyes begin to blur, just as your body begins to lean with sleep, he nods toward the scroll and says, "They'll need it. After us." You nod too. And as your fingers slide over the dry, ink-pocked surface, you understand something ancient and soft. The scroll survived, because someone stayed up late. Your shoulders still ache from the scriptorium floor. Ink stains linger on your fingertips, faintly sweet-smelling, like old dates and bitter gum. You wake slowly, sand clinging to your face, and stretch your legs beneath a fig tree just outside the city wall. Susa is quieter in the early morning, only the chirp of birds, the bark of a far-off dog, and the low rustle of a broom sweeping dust off temple steps. But today, your rest is brief. Something stirs in the distance. You hear the scrape of stone on stone, the creak of scaffolding, the groan of men lifting what seems impossibly heavy. You rise, rub your neck, and walk toward the noise. You're not in Jerusalem, but somehow, it feels familiar. A city wall, half-built, stones arranged with reverence, sweat, and the occasional muttered curse. Men in robes and women with baskets of mortar. Children scampering between piles of rubble, giggling until someone shouts and they vanish again. This is Nehemiah's story now. You slip between two workers carrying wooden beams and find yourself in a plaza surrounded by construction. The scent of lime dust stings your nostrils. It coats your teeth like ash. You cough, quietly, and keep moving. Nehemiah isn't here physically, but the echoes of his mission are everywhere. He was once a cupbearer, a servant trusted to taste the king's wine, to guard the royal throat. And yet, when news reached him that Jerusalem's walls were still broken, his heart cracked wider than the city gates. Historians wonder why the Persian court let him go, why they allowed him to rebuild a city that had once defied Babylonian and Persian rule. Maybe they didn't think it mattered. Or maybe, just maybe, Nehemiah was that persuasive, that persistent, that protected. And now, in lands still under Persian sway, you watch those same kinds of walls being rebuilt. Not physically, but emotionally. The exiles are trying to make sense of their new place in the world. To preserve identity without provoking the empire. To be Jewish, under Persian roofs. You step into the shade of an old olive tree, its bark scarred by carvings, ancient names, symbols, maybe curses, maybe blessings. Behind you, someone sighs. A man in simple robes joins you. His hands are dust-covered, nails worn down. He glances at you and says, "They're watching again." "Who?" you ask, quietly. He tilts his head toward the hills. "Them. The neighbors. The ones who don't like what we're building." And here's where things get thorny. The book of Nehemiah tells us that as the rebuilding effort gained steam, so did the resistance. Letters were sent to the Persian king, full of suspicion, claims that the Jews were planning rebellion. It nearly worked. Construction halted. Faith wavered. You hear it again in the way the man speaks now, cautious, soft. "We work with one hand," he says, holding up a trowel, "and hold the sword with the other." It's not a metaphor. Not here. You watch as a woman nearby lifts bricks while another keeps watch from the gate. Even the children have been taught signals. A certain whistle means drop everything and hide. Another means run. This is not a peaceful return. It's delicate, constantly negotiated, and in the gaps between Nehemiah's verses, you sense the weariness, the worry. Scholars still argue about how much power Nehemiah really had. Was he a Persian-appointed governor or a rogue official operating under political cover? Some believe he had strong allies at court. Others suspect his authority came less from his title and more from the sheer moral gravity of his mission. But what matters to you now isn't the politics. It's the people. You sit beside a boy patching a crack in the wall with crushed stone and clay. He hums softly, unaware of your gaze. His tunic is too big, his hands too small, but the wall grows under his effort just the same. Nearby, a scribe reads from a scroll aloud. Not to preach, but to remind. The words are familiar, but their weight feels different here. Under Persian sky, on contested land. This is who we are. Someone says, even here. And then there's the intrigue. Letters exchanged in secret, hidden hands within the city working against the builders. The book of Nehemiah describes the tension with almost cinematic flair. Plots to assassinate, to slander, to infiltrate, and yet, somehow, the wall is completed in 52 days. The fringe detail? Nehemiah's critics used psychological warfare. They sent fake letters, spread rumors, tried to make him afraid. Classic ancient trolling. And Nehemiah? He just kept building. You brush mortar dust from your sleeve and walk along the newest part of the wall. It's uneven in places, patched with mismatched stones, but it holds. You run your fingers along the top, still damp. The scent of wet earth clings to your skin. And just when you think the story has quieted, a woman runs past, whispering something urgent to a priest. He vanishes into the crowd. Something's brewing again. Persia isn't here with soldiers, but it's always present, in the background. Watching, waiting, deciding whether this small city on a hill will be useful, or dangerous. You turn your eyes eastward, to the open road that leads back into the empire. Somewhere beyond that horizon is a caravan. Riders with scrolls, words that will either protect or undo everything being built here. And just as the sun begins to slide behind the hills, casting the city in gold and shadow, you hear the call to prayer, deep and resonant. Not Jewish, not Christian, but Persian. The fire temples still burn. And somewhere in their shadows, another story is about to begin. You're back on the road again, this time longer, straighter, and more deliberate than any you've walked before. The gravel crunches predictably underfoot. And every few miles, you pass another stone marker carved with languages from 3 empires. Aramaic, Elamite, Old Persian. This is the Royal Road. Built by Darius I, the Persian king who made bureaucracy into an art form and roads into arteries of empire. This ancient highway once stretched over 1.500 miles from Sardis to Susa. You walk only a portion of it, but still, your knees have thoughts about that, mostly painful ones. The road is smoother than most, wide enough for chariots, flat enough for imperial speed. In fact, Herodotus wrote that messengers could ride it in 7 days. 7. You've been walking for what feels like half your life and your ankles sound like an old man's knees. Still, There's something thrilling about it. You imagine the people who once traveled this path. Soldiers with oiled shields. Priests with secrets folded into scrolls. And spies disguised as merchants. Somewhere in that mix, long ago, a Hebrew prophet might have walked this same road. Or a messenger bearing an edict that would shape the fate of Judea. You picture them trudging forward, dust-caked and sunburnt, their eyes fixed east or west, depending on what exile or hope awaited. Today, the wind is steady at your back. It carries the scent of horses and warm stone. A caravan approaches from the opposite direction, silks fluttering, bells chiming. You step aside, and one rider tips his head respectfully, his beard braided in the Parthian style. You catch a flash of parchment tied to his saddle. A letter, maybe, or a prophecy. You fall in behind them for a while, the rhythm of their camels helping your tired legs find a second wind. One of the traders tells you they're headed to Persepolis, though he grumbles that the taxes there are worse than anywhere else. Another mutters that bandits near the Tigris have been stealing more than gold. Scrolls. Just scrolls, ancient ones. Scholars still debate whether Jewish texts traveled this road during the early Persian period or whether it was mostly oral tradition that spread. Some say both. Others point to trade records mentioning scribes, ink, and papyrus among the more traditional cargoes. Whatever the truth, this road didn't just carry goods. It carried ideas and stories. You pause at a rest station, an ancient postal relay called a paradisish. There's a stone bench and a fountain that drips slowly, stubbornly, like it's still on the royal payroll. You sip from a cracked clay cup, cool water washing dust from your throat, and listen to the conversations swirling around you. Someone's reciting an old Persian poem. Another speaks of Alexander the Great, how he marched through here and lit half the empire on fire. A few others mutter about Rome, its hunger, its armies, but one old man, huddled beneath a threadbare blanket, speaks of Daniel, the Daniel. He swears he saw a lion once, in Babylon, not in a cage, but in a dream. He says the beast stood silent while a man prayed, and flames danced all around but never burned. You know the story, of course. Daniel and the lion's den. But to hear it retold here, under a Persian moon, with spice smoke in your nose and tired travelers around you, it hits different. The Book of Daniel, you recall, is set during Babylonian exile but is flavored with Persian politics. Lions, dreams, writing on the wall. It's half prophecy, half fever dream. Scholars still argue over when it was written. Some say during the Maccabean revolt. Others place it earlier. Either way, Persia is everywhere in its backdrop. From Darius the Mede to Cyrus the Liberator. You think about Daniel again. Not just the storybook version, but the man, a Jewish exile, navigating foreign courts, interpreting dreams, surviving plots. You wonder how many roads like this he walked, how many kings he advised, how many nights he lay awake under stars that belonged to a sky he didn't call home. The caravan moves on. You rise, joints protesting, and follow. The sky darkens now. Stars begin to blink into view, and the road glows faintly in the moonlight, straight as truth. Silent as prophecy, you pass another marker. To Persepolis, 438 leagues. Your legs sigh. As you walk, a small fox trots across the path. It pauses, looks at you like it knows your secrets, then vanishes into the brush. You smile, then wince, then keep walking. The road begins to curve. The hills rise around you. And just ahead, flickering against the dark like a dream struggling to stay awake, is the light of another station. Another fire. Another whisper. This time, it's not traders. It's a gathering of men in quiet robes, seated in a half circle around a manuscript spread out like a treasure map. You approach. Listen. They speak of beasts with horns, of kingdoms rising and falling, of an ancient of days seated on a throne of flame. Apocalyptic visions, Persian dreams, and suddenly, the road you're on isn't just literal anymore. It's prophetic. You huddle closer to the fire now. The dry wind tugging at your sleeves as if trying to drag you back into the dark. The men around you speak low, reverent, like they're telling ghost stories laced with revelation. One of them rolls out a sheet of parchment with trembling fingers. Its edges curled from time and heat. Upon it, symbols, horns, wings, numbers, beasts, eyes like lanterns, a ram charging west, a goat from the west with a singular, wrathful horn. You blink, rub your eyes. Are you seeing this, or dreaming it? You're in the middle of what scholars call apocalyptic literature. Visions so strange they'd feel more at home in a surreal painting than a sacred scroll. But here, under the Persian stars, there's scripture. The book of Daniel again. This time chapters 8 and beyond. The wild stuff. The nightmares turned into prophecy. Persia plays a starring role, metaphorically, of course. The ram with 2 horns is said to be the kings of Media and Persia. The goat, a future conqueror, often thought to be Alexander the Great, who charges out of nowhere and topples everything. You listen, the fire popping softly beside you, as a young scribe recites the vision in Aramaic. It rolls off his tongue like poetry, violent, cryptic poetry, a world of shattered empires and celestial courts, of angels named Gabriel whispering truths too large to hold. One man, eyes shadowed by his hood, murmurs, "It's all symbolic." Another replies, "Or it's already happening." And there you are, right in the middle of a theological debate that still rages centuries later. Is apocalyptic literature about the future? The present? The trauma of the past? Daniel's visions may be set in Babylon and Persia, but they speak to people under oppression, craving justice, aching for cosmic resolution. You shift on your stone seat, feeling the cold creep into your knees. The landscape is quiet, but your mind races. You remember the lions again, the writing on the wall, the 4 beasts rising from the sea. You remember that Daniel lived during the reigns of multiple kings, Babylonian, Median, Persian, that his survival was itself a prophecy. The fringe detail? Some scholars suggest these visions were edited, or even written, during the Maccabean era, using Persia as a kind of mask. Others believe they were genuinely received in exile, coded to outlast imperial censorship. The mystery remains. Maybe that's the point. You look at the man across the fire from you. He's sketching a winged leopard into the dirt with a stick. Another beast from the vision. He adds 4 heads, 4 kingdoms. He says softly, or maybe 4 generals. He looks up at you. Depends who you ask. You nod slowly, your body heavy with the weight of symbolism. You're not just walking through history anymore. You're swimming through layered meaning. Every lion could be a king. Every goat, a future war. Every breath, a step toward the end, or the beginning. The fire snaps, and sparks lift into the air like glowing syllables. You tilt your head back. The stars seem closer now. One twinkles red, pulsing slightly. Another streaks across the sky, vanishing before you can make a wish. You rise and walk a few paces toward the edge of the clearing. The earth drops suddenly into a dry ravine. From here, the hills roll outward like a dark sea. You can almost hear them breathe. Somewhere out there is Persepolis. Somewhere behind you, Jerusalem. But right now, you're between them, spiritually, politically, prophetically. You sit on a smooth rock and close your eyes. Try to picture what Daniel saw. Not just the beasts or thrones, but the fear, the awe, the trembling in his bones when the angel spoke. The helplessness of knowing something big was coming, but not when. A warm presence settles beside you. One of the scribes has joined you in the quiet. "I think the visions were warnings," he says, almost to himself, "but also comfort." You open one eye. Comfort? He shrugs. Sometimes it helps to know the chaos is part of something. Even if you don't understand it. You look back at the fire. The scroll has been rolled up again. Someone's laying out dates and almonds. The scent is sweet, sticky, grounding. The wind shifts. And with it, your thoughts drift again. To those who came after Daniel. Who inherited his warnings. Who lived under the next empire. And the next. You wonder if they found hope in these strange dreams. Or if the symbolism simply gave shape to their helplessness. Either way, they kept the visions, copied them, taught them, let them anchor hope. You watch the flames dwindle. One by one, the men begin to sleep. Heads resting on packs, scrolls tucked beneath cloaks like pillows of parchment. You lie back too, staring up at a sky that knows more than it tells. The cold creeps into your bones again. But it feels less cruel now. Just honest. And just as your breath begins to slow, just as your thoughts begin to melt into dreams, a new sound rises, a quiet bark. A dog, not wild, familiar, and in the distance, like a flicker of memory made flesh. A father, a son, a fish, and an angel walk into view. Their story is next. You wake to the sound of paws padding softly across the dirt. Not a wolf, not a jackal, just a little dog, tail curled, ears twitching, walking confidently ahead of you like he knows exactly where you're going and assumes you'll catch up. His fur is dusty but well kept, and he carries himself with the air of someone who's seen a lot and doesn't need to explain any of it. You blink against the early sun, pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, and follow. The road here winds gently through low hills covered in dry grass. The air is softer this morning, scented faintly with olive and fig. A light mist hangs in the valleys, catching the first rays of dawn and turning the world gold around the edges. You squint as the dog pauses at a fork in the road and looks back at you expectantly. And then you remember. Tobit, you're not sure how you know. But something about this path feels like it belongs to that strange, wandering little book tucked between more familiar ones. The Book of Tobit, part folklore, part moral tale, part theological mystery, is set not in Jerusalem, but in Nineveh, in exile, deep within Assyrian and Persian lands. And somewhere in that story, a dog, just like this one. You smile, involuntarily. The Book of Tobit begins with sorrow. A righteous man blinded by bird droppings, yes. Bird droppings, after doing good deeds. His son, Tobias, is sent on a journey to retrieve silver left with a distant kinsman. It's a simple errand that turns epic. Along the way, Tobias is guided by a stranger named Azariah, who, spoiler, is the angel Raphael in disguise. You walk now with the dog ahead and the sun behind. The road feels dreamlike, stitched together from fragments of old scrolls and travelers' tales. Beside a bubbling stream, you pause. The air smells of moss and river stone. You kneel to splash your face, and catch a glimpse of movement beneath the surface. A fish, large, startling. It thrashes violently, nearly leaping into your arms. Just like in the story. In Tobit, Raphael instructs Tobias to catch the fish, cut out its liver, heart, and gall, and save them. The purpose? One will be used to drive away a demon, the other to heal his father's blindness. You're not holding a fish now, but your fingers still smell faintly of river silt. You shake them dry and rise again. The dog trots ahead. This tale isn't found in the Hebrew Bible, but it's treasured in Catholic and Orthodox traditions. Scholars still debate its origins. Some say it's a Persian folk story woven into Jewish morality. Others argue it's a narrative midrash, a kind of creative expansion meant to comfort exiles. Either way, its geography is distinctly Eastern. You pass through a small village. A woman sweeping her doorway hums a tune that sounds older than the bricks beneath her feet. A merchant grumbles about the price of salt. A child draws shapes in the dust with a stick. One of them looks suspiciously like a fish with wings. You ask a gray-bearded man if he's heard the story of Tobias. He chuckles. Of course. And the angel with the strange name. That one never grows old. He winks. You nod. Then he adds, more quietly, some stories stay because we need them. You think about that as you leave the village. The road curves, and the dog leads you up a ridge where cypress trees bend in the breeze like old men in prayer. You sit beneath one, catching your breath. The view stretches wide, plains. A river glinting in the distance. And behind you, the rising hills of old Assyrian land. In the book of Tobit, the ending is almost too neat. Demons vanquished, blindness cured, marriage celebrated, silver retrieved. You might roll your eyes if it weren't so healing. There's something soothing about it. Something you feel in your shoulders now, as they slowly relax against the bark of the tree. The fringe detail? Tobit ends with a prophecy, the destruction of Nineveh. A real historical event, but in this story, it comes not with vengeance, but with the quiet closure of a life lived in exile, and a hope passed down through dreams and instruction. You glance beside you. The dog is curled up now, nose tucked under paw, tail twitching as if chasing some celestial rabbit. You almost don't want to move, but you know better by now. The road always continues, and as you stand again, dusting your knees, the air changes. You smell incense, not the homey kind, but the heavy, sacred stuff. You hear the soft clap of sandals on tile, the laughter of children behind veils, the voice of someone wise, but not from here, speaking of stars, and kings, and foreign births. The dog is already up again, tail high, trotting ahead. You follow, because soon, the desert will open again, and a different kind of royalty will come riding. You first hear the camels before you see them, the soft clop of hooves, the occasional grunt, and the rhythmic jangle of metal charms strung from their harnesses. The desert ahead glows amber under the rising sun, sand dunes rippling like waves frozen mid-motion, and cutting through it all, in perfect formation, are riders from the east. You step off the road and kneel behind a low cluster of stones. Not out of fear, but instinct. This is not your usual caravan. They ride with purpose, draped in heavy robes that shimmer with dyed thread, faces veiled against the grit of the wind. These men carry an unmistakable aura of knowledge and distance, like people who sleep among scrolls and speak in riddles even when they're only asking for bread. The word that clings to your mind is magi. Not illusionists, not court jesters, but astrologer priests, philosophers, watchers of skies and readers of dreams. Their roots go back to the ancient Median priesthood, woven through with Zoroastrian threads, and now they move across Judean sands, chasing something not quite of this world. The Gospel of Matthew says it simply: Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" But that little line carries an empire's worth of weight. These aren't Jewish pilgrims, they're Persians, or Parthians. By this time, crossing political and religious boundaries because of a star. You watch one of them dismount, brush sand from his knee, and check a scroll tied with red cord. His lips move silently, calculating, comparing. The others adjust saddlebags that jingle with precious cargo, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Each gift, you know, carries layered meaning. Gold for kingship, frankincense for divinity, myrrh for death. It's a strange trio of offerings for a newborn. Unless, of course, the Magi knew something everyone else didn't. You follow them discreetly. They don't seem to notice you, or maybe they do, and simply don't mind. After all, if you've traveled this far by starlight and prophecy, what's one dusty dreamer more? They stop in Jerusalem, ask their question, "Where is he?" Herod hears of it, and you feel the tremor run through the city like a chill under your tunic. You duck into a shaded archway and listen as whispers coil through the alleyways. A king born? Now? The scribes quote Micah, Bethlehem. The Magi mount their camels again, and you follow into the dark. The road to Bethlehem is quiet. Stars above blink like knowing eyes. And one, just one, seems brighter than the rest. It hovers, guides, leads. There's debate, of course. Was it a comet? A conjunction? A miracle entirely outside astronomy? Scholars line up on every side, their voices soft with awe or sharp with skepticism. But tonight, under this sky, it simply shines. You arrive in Bethlehem just before dawn. The village is small, barely more than a huddle of stone and timber homes. The Magi dismount again, no trumpets, no guards, no formalities. They step inside a modest house. The air is still. Even the animals nearby seem to hold their breath. You don't enter. You stay near the doorway, leaning softly against the wall. Through a narrow opening, you glimpse a young woman holding a child. A man beside her, protective, wide-eyed. And the Magi? They bow. Rich, learned men from a distant empire, falling to their knees before a baby in a borrowed house. The dog from before, yes, that dog, trots in and curls up at the child's feet. Completely unbothered, you stifle a laugh. Of course he found his way here. One of the Magi lays a small chest on the floor. Another offers an ornate jar, the glass shining like sunlight frozen in time. The last produces a cloth-wrapped bundle and places it down with care. The room is silent, not solemn, just full of presence, of weight, of something you can't name but feel in your throat and fingertips. The dog shifts. The child gurgles. Mary, still barely more than a girl, smiles in that tired, infinite way that mothers do. And Joseph watches everything with the wary awe of a man who has not slept properly in weeks and probably never will again. You back away, not out of fear, just reverence. Outside, the Magi speak in hushed tones. The star above begins to fade, and you hear them whisper about Herod. A dream, a warning. They will not return the same way they came. And you understand the wisdom in that. The fringe detail? The number 3 is tradition. The gospel doesn't say how many came, just that they brought 3 gifts. Some Eastern traditions claim there were 12. Others give them names, Melchior, Gaspar, Balthazar, but none of that matters as much as the act itself. Persian priests, bowing, in Bethlehem, you watch as they disappear into the dawn, the sun catching the edges of their robes like threads of fire. The road curves, then swallows them whole. You sit alone now, the morning cool against your back. The child's cry fades behind you. The star is gone, but the sky feels bigger somehow, wider, and just as your eyes begin to close, soothed by the weight of what you've seen, you hear another voice. This one speaks Greek, and it speaks of Paul. The voice is measured, precise, like a teacher who knows every word carries weight. You open your eyes to see a man standing under a palm tree, parchment in one hand, walking stick in the other. His tunic is plain, his beard neatly trimmed, but his eyes burn with something more than sunlight. He speaks Greek, but with an accent, not quite Roman, not quite Eastern. His name is Paul. You've heard of him, of course. The tent maker, the apostle, the troublemaker who once hunted believers and then became one of their loudest voices. He's in the middle of a letter. Not to you, but to a group you didn't know existed out here, in Parthian territory. Somewhere between Edessa and the Zagros Mountains. He's writing about grace, about freedom, about the strange, upside-down logic of a kingdom that begins in a stable and spreads not by sword, but by story. And you wonder, how did Paul get here? Well, maybe he didn't, not in the flesh. But his words did, his letters, his ideas, long after his feet stopped walking. His teachings moved like wind across desert and plain, through traders, scribes, fugitives, and faithful grandmothers carrying stitched scraps of parchment in their belts. You follow a trail past the tree, through a stone village where Christian symbols are etched into clay homes, rough crosses, fish shapes, Fragments of Greek letters. Some are faded, some are fresh. You pass a home where a boy recites aloud from a scrap of scripture, stumbling over the longer words but smiling proudly as he gets them right. You settle near a well. The water is warm, mineral-rich, but refreshing enough. The woman drawing it smiles and asks, "Are you one of Paul's people?" You hesitate, then nod. She laughs softly and hands you a cup. Historians still argue whether Paul ever made it this far east. The Acts of the Apostles traces his journeys through Asia Minor, Greece, and possibly Rome. But some traditions, and several ancient manuscripts, suggest he dreamed of going even farther. Maybe even Persia. The fringe detail? A 2nd century text called the Acts of Paul and Thecla, apocryphal. Yes, but beloved, shows Paul reaching into Syria and beyond, his influence brushing against the edge of Parthian land. And in the generations after him, his name carried weight like thunder. You walk through the village as evening settles, golden light spilling across walls carved with geometric designs. The churches here don't look like churches. They look like homes. Because they are. The first believers in this region didn't meet in basilicas. They met around ovens and cisterns, between olive presses and grain bins. In one courtyard, a woman sings a hymn while kneading dough. You don't recognize the melody, but the words, neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, echo Paul's voice. A child joins her, off-key but radiant. You sit nearby, the scent of baking bread rising like prayer. And the teachings, oh, the teachings, they've morphed, sure, adapted to new ears, but the heart of them remains. Love without condition, unity across tribes, a peace that doesn't depend on empire. In a back room of the village, a small group gathers around a dim lamp. They unroll a letter. It's worn, patched, nearly illegible in places, but it's unmistakably Paul. His voice is still there. Do not grow weary in doing good. One man begins to cry quietly. His wife places a hand on his shoulder. You don't ask why. You don't need to. Faith has a way of finding the broken spots. You step outside again. The stars emerge, patient as ever. You lean against a clay wall and look out across the valley, where torchlights flicker like grounded constellations. And in that stillness, you feel the weight of what Paul started, not just churches or creeds, but movement, of thought, of compassion, of people risking their lives to speak words the world wasn't quite ready for. You feel your knees creak as you shift. This road has been long, but it's still humming. You think back to earlier that day, to the Magi, the child, the star, and now, to this, the firelight in a clay home, someone whispering about grace, and a letter passed down like an heirloom. And just when you think you've reached the heart of it all, a breeze stirs from the east, carrying with it the scent of cinnamon, and something older than scripture, silk. You taste it in the air before you see it, cinnamon. Yes, but also cardamom, nutmeg, and something faintly floral, silk, real silk, not just the fabric, but the story behind it, the hands that wove it, the desert it crossed, the silence it survived. You crest a hill and there it is, a caravan winding through the valley below like a river of color and noise. Camels loaded with crates, horses straining under the weight of bolts of fabric, boxes of dates, and, tucked in the corners of saddlebags, scrolls. You blink. Scrolls? You hurry down, your steps light with anticipation despite the dull throb in your ankles. A trader waves you over with a cheerful nod. He has a face like sun-baked leather and eyes like wet stone, both weathered and kind. Looking for something rare? He asks, lifting a cloth to reveal bundles wrapped in palm fronds. Inside, ink-stained parchment, one in Greek, another in Syriac, a third, in Persian, marked with strange marginalia. You run your fingers gently along the edge of a scroll. The ink is flaking. The parchment smells like spice and oil. But you recognize the name tucked halfway down the first line, Yeshua. You're on the Silk Road. Yes, but more than that, you're at a crossroad of scripture, of tongues, of truths passing like whispered secrets between merchants, monks, and mystics. The man leans in. From the Christians in Marv. He says, or maybe Samarkand, they don't sign their names. He winks, then moves on to another buyer. The fringe detail? Archaeologists have uncovered early Christian inscriptions and scrolls as far east as China's Xi'an province, Syriac script. Christian crosses, references to the Messiah, traveling not by conquest, but by commerce. You walk through the market. The smells blend together, clove, animal sweat, smoke, leather. You pass a woman selling glass beads, a man with live quails in a basket, and a child reciting part of the Lord's Prayer in Persian accented Greek. You pause, listen again. Yes, it's Paul's voice. Faith, hope, and love remain, but the accent is unmistakably Eastern. There's something profoundly beautiful in that. The idea that scripture, like silk, adapts to the hands that carry it. You step into a shaded tent where a group of travelers sip tea thick with honey and pepper. In the center, an older man with eyebrows like windblown straw unrolls a scroll. Not to sell, to share. He reads from the Gospel of John, translating as he goes, sentence by sentence. In the beginning was the Word. The others nod slowly. Some cross themselves. Some bow their heads. One whispers a Zoroastrian prayer under his breath. Perhaps not quite sure what to do with Jesus, but still deeply moved. A young woman across the circle notices your hands. You're a scribe? She asks. You glance down, ink stains on your fingertips again. Always the giveaway. She beckons you closer and hands you a piece of rough paper. I copied this from a traveler. Do you recognize it? You read, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Yes, you do. You spend the afternoon helping her correct the lettering, adjusting spacing, smoothing the strokes. She listens closely, tongue between her teeth, concentrating. When she finishes, she smiles so softly it barely moves her face. These words are silk, she says, folding the paper carefully. You nod. You don't need to say more. As evening falls, the caravan begins to pack again. Traders tie scrolls back into bundles. Someone tucks a cross under their cloak. Another murmurs a psalm before leading a mule onto the road. You walk a little farther with them. The road is uneven, but your feet have learned the rhythm. The stars begin to stretch their limbs across the darkening sky. And in the hush, you hear low singing again. 3 or 4 voices weaving verses from different gospels into a single melody. You don't understand every word, but you understand the meaning. That faith isn't static. It travels. It adapts. It smuggles itself into markets and homes and hidden caves. Sometimes carried in jeweled boxes. Other times in the margins of shipping manifests. Just before you leave the caravan, the trader with the wet stone eyes places something in your palm. It's a coin. Small, square, punched with a cross on one side and an unfamiliar script on the other. For luck, he says, and for memory. You thank him, tuck it into your pouch, and as you walk away, you feel the road tilt slightly again. East still lies ahead, but north, south, and west hum too. All directions echo with story. And just when you think the road might quiet down, when your muscles are beginning to soften into the night, you hear the low chant of a bell from a stone building perched on the horizon. A church, or what's left of one. The church appears slowly, less a structure, more a shadow against the stony hill. From a distance, it looks like a weathered barn, slouched under centuries of wind. But as you approach, details emerge. A faded cross carved into the lintel, worn smooth by countless hands. Narrow windows once filled with colored glass. Now empty but dignified. The bell above the entrance still hangs. Rusted but unbroken. It doesn't ring, it aches. You push open the creaking door. And the air greets you like a memory. Damp, cold, thick with the scent of old incense and older stone. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by what little sunlight slips through the broken ceiling. Dust floats in golden shafts, swirling around wooden benches and scattered scraps of parchment that flutter when you pass. You're standing inside a forgotten church of Persia. This isn't Rome, not Constantinople, not Jerusalem. This is a whisper, a remnant, one of many that once dotted the empire. From the deserts of Khuzestan to the hills near Ekbatana, tiny Christian communities that thrived here before most people realized Christianity had even reached these lands. You kneel near a small altar, the stone cool against your knees. Above it, a faded fresco depicts a bearded figure, likely Christ, surrounded by script in Syriac. The paint is flaking, but the eyes are clear. They watch you, not with judgment, but with deep, knowing fatigue. A breeze slips through the cracked roof and rustles the pages on the floor. You pick one up carefully. The writing is faint but legible, an excerpt from the Psalms. Written in a hand that wavers with age. A marginal note reads, "Copied by Daniel, servant of the flame and the word." You smile. The flame could mean Zoroastrianism. The word, the gospel. Only here could those two be uttered in the same breath. The fringe detail? During the Sassanid Empire, 224–651 CE. Christianity spread rapidly in Persia. The Church of the East, often referred to as Nestorian, developed independently from the Western Roman Church. At its peak, it stretched from Antioch to China, with Persian Christians forming vibrant, deeply rooted communities. You move deeper into the sanctuary, stepping over stones engraved with crosses and inscriptions in Greek, Persian, and Syriac. At the far end of the room, behind a crumbling curtain, lies what was once the bishop's study. A shelf still holds a few surviving manuscripts, their bindings fragile as dried leaves. One is a copy of the Gospel of Luke. Another contains homilies, possibly by Theodore of Mopsuestia, one of the Church of the East's theological giants. You sit, run your fingers gently across the edge of the wood. Outside, the wind picks up, pushing a low hum through the broken window. For a moment, it sounds like singing. You close your eyes. Let yourself believe it. A group must have gathered here once. Not many, maybe a dozen. Farmers, traders, widows. They would have whispered prayers in Aramaic. They would have taken communion with flatbread baked in clay ovens. Baptized their children in stone basins filled with cold mountain water. Cried during psalms that reminded them of Jerusalem, or of Golgotha, or of home. And then, one day, they were gone. Not all at once, not in flames or slaughter, but gradually. Pressure from Zoroastrian elites. Later, the rising tide of Islam. Changing laws, closed churches, taxes, exile. You trace a finger along the wall where names are scratched faintly in charcoal. Shapir, Miriam, Theophilos. No one visits them now. Except you. A rat scurries from a shadowed corner. A few leaves blow in through the broken door. The moment should feel abandoned. But somehow, it doesn't, because the word remained. The Gospels copied here traveled east, on donkeys and across river barges. Through whispered sermons and memorized verses. And the people? They built more churches. In caves. In forests. In cities most maps don't mention. You step back outside. The late sun gilding the hills in ochre and brass. Far below, smoke rises from a village. The road stretches onward, coiling around the land like scripture on a scroll. And just as your sandals crunch back onto the path, a man approaches, slow, cautious. He carries a bundle wrapped in linen. He opens it to reveal a wooden cross. Chipped but sturdy. It was buried in the floor. He says, voice cracked with age, "They said to keep it safe." You nod, help him wrap it again. And when he offers it to you, hands trembling, you understand. It's not just relics that travel. It's memory. And just beyond the ridge, past a bend where fig trees cling to the cliff, a new voice waits, different language, different theology, but the same stories, retold through different prayers. Because when Persia changed, the scriptures didn't disappear, they adapted. The air is thick now, not with dust, but incense. It rolls like fog out of a small adobe shrine tucked between two fig trees. Its chimney coughing out tendrils of white that smell faintly of sandalwood and saffron. You pass through an arched doorway, low enough that your back grazes the stone, and enter a room lit by oil lamps shaped like lotus blossoms. There are no pews, no crucifix, but the reverence in the air is unmistakable. A group of men sit cross-legged in a circle, turbans unwrapping slightly in the humid air. One stands at the center, chanting in Arabic, but not just Arabic. There's something else woven in, something Persian. He speaks of Musa, of Na, of Maryam. You realize quickly, these are familiar names. Moses, Noah, Mary. But this isn't Christian scripture. It's the Quran. You sit quietly at the edge, unnoticed, listening as verses pour out in cadences both foreign and hauntingly familiar. The speaker describes Mary's miraculous birth, her purity, her temple service. He tells of how she withdrew alone, how the angel spoke to her, how she conceived by the will of God. There's reverence here, deep, poetic reverence. Mary is not just mentioned in Islam. She's honored. An entire chapter is named after her. And the Persian world, once so filled with Zoroastrian fire temples, then dotted with Nestorian churches, has long since become fluent in this new language of faith. You lean against a wall cooled by thick mud brick and glance at the painted tiles above the altar niche. Calligraphy flows like water, each stroke singing praises to a single God. Not three, not begotten, but eternal, indivisible, merciful. This is a different rhythm, but it hums with echoes of the same ancient chords. The fringe detail? Iran, once Persia, is home to some of the richest and most complex Islamic theology. Shia Islam in particular weaves biblical characters deeply into its tradition. Prophets like Adam, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus are considered part of the sacred lineage. Their stories retold, their virtues remembered, their lessons reinterpreted. You step outside and walk along a garden wall where children play with reed hoops and a man chants under his breath while pruning pomegranates. You ask if he knows the story of Yusuf. He nods, smiles. The most beautiful of all men, sold by his brothers, imprisoned, then made a prince. You blink. Genesis and the Quran overlap here more than they diverge. The pain, the forgiveness, the long arc of justice, it's all still there. Further down the lane, you find a school. Inside, a teacher recites the story of Noah and the ark to a circle of young boys. They gasp when he describes the flood, laugh when the animals board in pairs, quiet when the water rises. You sit in the back. Your body aches from so much walking, but your mind is alert. Because here, centuries after the prophets walked and the scrolls were sealed, the stories still move, still teach. A girl passing by hums a lullaby. The words? You don't recognize them all. But the name she sings, Isa, is clear. Jesus. In Islamic tradition, Jesus is not just a prophet. He's the Messiah, born of a virgin, a worker of miracles, and destined to return. You find a small bookshop beside a mosque courtyard. Inside, shelves of religious commentary, rows of Qurans, and in the corner, a pile of dusty books no one touches. One contains an Arabic translation of the Psalms. Another, a fragment of Genesis, handwritten in Farsi. The shopkeeper sees you looking. We keep those for comparison, he says, to remember where we agree. And that might be the most unexpected thing of all. Not that the Bible was preserved by Christians, but that echoes of it endure in the hearts of people who don't call it the Bible, but still live by its stories. Historians still wrestle with how and why this happened. Was it shared oral tradition? Deliberate theological borrowing? Divine overlap? No consensus. But on a street corner in Shiraz, where bakers sing and minarets rise, a boy asks his grandfather, "Why did Abraham break the idols?" And the old man answers, not with a lecture, but with a twinkle in his eye, because sometimes truth doesn't whisper, it shouts. You rest beneath a tree near the bazaar, the smell of flatbread and rosewater rising like prayers. Around you, the city pulses, not in conflict, but in complex harmony, a mosaic of faiths, accents, books, and beliefs. And just as your breath slows, just as your thoughts begin to drift like leaves in the canal beside you, a group of pilgrims passes by, one with a cross, another with a green banner, another with a worn scroll tucked into his sash. They don't speak. They don't need to. Because beneath every robe, every sandal, every prayer, one truth endures. The word traveled far, and Persia remembered. The city behind you hums with memory, but the road ahead pulses with something quieter, resilience. You follow a river now, its banks dotted with wild mint and long-legged herons. The water sluggish but determined. Along its edges, footpaths weave through tall grass, beaten down by centuries of sandals and hooves. And beside one of these paths, tucked behind a low wall of mud brick and moss, is a home. Not a grand house, just a single room with shelves carved directly into the wall, where rolled scrolls sit beside small jars of ink, dried berries, and folded cloth. A boy sits cross-legged at the entrance, threading cord through a tiny, leather-bound book. He looks up when you approach, then nods at the bundle in your arms. "You carry texts too?" he asks. You don't answer with words, just open the cloth to reveal a few surviving scraps. He gestures you inside. This is not a formal church or mosque. It's not a synagogue. It's something quieter. A workshop, yes, but also a memory vault. A crossroads. A place where words are preserved not for ritual, but for movement. On the central table sits a heavy volume, its spine cracked, its pages patched with different textures of paper, lambskin, bark, silk, papyrus. On one page, the Psalms. On another, a Persian proverb written beside a quote from Isaiah. Next to it, a line from the Gospel of Luke, scribbled in Syriac. Below that, a note in Arabic. Do not forget the wisdom of those before you. You blink. This isn't just a holy book. It's a conversation. You sit beside the boy, your knees popping softly as they settle. He works with practiced hands, threading, mending, copying. He points out verses he's memorized. Some he recites in Hebrew, others in Arabic, one or two in Persian. He grins when he gets to a line from the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Then he adds, my uncle says that applies to merchants too. You both laugh. This is how scripture moves now, not through sermons or courts, but through thread and parchment and mouths that whisper when they can't shout. Through songs hummed under breath while stirring lentils. Through prayers disguised as bedtime stories. A passing traveler stops at the doorway and greets the boy in a dialect you barely recognize. The boy replies fluidly, then hands him a slip of paper, just one line of copied verse. The traveler tucks it into his sash, presses a coin into the boy's hand, and is gone before you can blink. Later, the boy tells you they come from everywhere. Armenia, Bukhara, Basra, some Muslim, some Christian, some something else. They don't always ask for full texts. Sometimes, just a blessing, a memory. You help him for a while, trimming the edges of parchment, sorting brittle bundles, pressing down curling corners with a warm stone. One scroll, wrapped in purple silk, is too fragile to open. The boy touches it reverently. My grandfather says it's from Antioch. He says, we don't read it anymore, but we keep it. The fringe detail? In medieval Persia, translations of biblical texts, not just in Syriac or Hebrew, but in Persian and Arabic, existed quietly, sometimes tucked inside Islamic theological works. Commentaries would quote Jesus, not as a prophet to convert from, but as a voice worth listening to. He was Isa to Muslims, Yeshua to Jews, Christos to believers, and somehow, all of them knew his words. You sit near the doorway as the sun begins to set. The light catches the dust in the air, turning it into gold. A neighbor arrives with figs and a few cracked pots. Another offers oil for the lamps. A small girl brings a page she copied herself, crooked, uneven, but proudly inked. It reads, "In the beginning." The boy claps for her. She giggles and runs off again. You lean your head back against the wall and listen to the river. It whispers secrets as old as Eden. And in this quiet place, you realize something. The Bible didn't only survive in temples and basilicas. It survived in kitchens and courtyards. It survived in homes like this. And now, as you close your eyes and feel the smooth leather of the book still resting in your lap, you realize the text isn't just being preserved. It's being translated, again and again, not just into new languages, but new lives. And just as the last light fades, just as your breathing slows with the hush of the room, the boy speaks again. Some of the verses are in Shia prayers too. My uncle says there's even a line from the Psalms in our Friday chant. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Truth travels. And just beyond the doorway, the call to prayer begins. Low, melancholy, familiar, and for a moment, you wonder if it's Psalm or Quran. And then you smile, because maybe it's both. The chant still lingers in your ears as you walk. Long after the minaret fades into the twilight, its echo rides the wind, like the hum of something ancient and tender. Your feet follow a narrow trail between terraced fields, their edges stone stacked and moss covered. The earth beneath you damp from a hidden spring. The stars are out again, dimming and glowing in quiet cycles. Like they're breathing, a flicker of lantern light draws you toward a small shrine nestled beside a cypress tree. It's quiet inside, just one man seated cross-legged on a cushion, swaying gently as he chants from a prayer book. His voice is low and rich, woven with grief and awe. You don't understand every word, but you catch a name, clear and familiar. Musa, Moses, then Noah, then Miriam, Mary. You sit quietly in the corner, and the man doesn't stop or look up. You are part of the silence now, a witness. This is Shia territory, and you are inside a Husseiniya, a prayer hall that isn't always grand, but always sacred. The man is reciting Ziyarat Ashura, but woven into it are names from a much older tapestry. Stories of suffering, of standing alone, of truth spoken in deserts and courts and wildernesses. These aren't just figures of the past. They're woven into identity. In Shia Islam, the stories of biblical figures don't vanish. They're absorbed, translated, lit by new fire. You hear it in the way he speaks of Maryam, not only as a virgin mother, but as a woman of absolute surrender. You hear it in the description of Musa, not just the parting of the sea, but his exile, his doubt, his refusal to give up. The fringe detail? In Shia thought, the Imams, descendants of Muhammad, are often compared to earlier prophets. Ali is likened to Aaron, Hussein to Jesus. Their sufferings, their sacrifices, echo the same themes. Some Shia scholars even reference verses from the Bible, especially Psalms and the Gospels, to draw parallels between Islamic and biblical figures. Outside, the wind shifts. The air smells of rose water and damp soil. You pass a small cemetery with gravestones inscribed in delicate Farsi calligraphy. Some of the headstones bear crescents. Others, oddly, have tiny crosses carved into their bases. Not out of confusion, but remembrance. You pass through a town square where a storyteller stands on a platform. Surrounded by candles, he recites a tale, not from the Quran or Bible, but clearly born from both. A man tempted by power. A desert. A voice in the fire. The crowd listens in stillness. The children wide-eyed. At the end, he whispers a line in Arabic. Then repeats it in Persian. We are all descended from prophets. Every one of us carries a spark. Later, in a tea house carved into the base of a hill, you overhear an elderly man debating with a younger scholar. They're quoting surahs and hadiths. But suddenly, the younger one throws out a line you recognize, straight from Isaiah. They will beat their swords into plowshares. The older man laughs. That verse should be in all our books. He says, sipping thick, bitter tea. You smile in the corner. Because in a way, it already is. You step outside again. The town is quiet now. Shutters drawn. Smoke rising from chimneys. You rest beneath an awning strung with drying herbs. Above you, a wooden beam is carved with a prayer, not Islamic, not Christian, just ancient, a wish for rain, for peace, for strength to speak truth even when the truth costs. You trace it with your finger and think of how these lands, this Iran, this Persia, never truly erased the Bible. They recited it in new names, wove it into different prayers, hid it inside poetry and parable and proverb. You hear echoes of Job in Sufi laments, echoes of Solomon in Persian love poetry, echoes of Jonah in dervish chants. Truth, it seems, does not care which name you give it. It only asks that you listen. And just as your eyes begin to drift closed, just as your body leans into the wooden post behind you, someone approaches. A boy, maybe 10, holding a small book bound in green cloth. He sees the weariness in your eyes and sits beside you without speaking. Then, softly, he opens the book and reads, in Farsi. But the words? They're David's. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. Because the verses never left. They just learned how to speak a new tongue. You dream of ink. It drips slowly, thick, dark, sweet as pomegranate syrup, onto parchment that ripples like the surface of a pond. A hand moves across the page, writing carefully in 2 columns. One in Hebrew, one in Persian, each word a bridge. When you wake, you're in a caravanserai, half ruined. Roof open to the stars. Walls patched with moss and the echo of every traveler who ever passed through. Your back aches from sleeping on woven reeds. Your mouth tastes like dust and cinnamon. But your eyes, still blurry with sleep, land on a satchel beside you. It's yours. Or maybe it isn't. You untie the flap, and inside, wrapped in layers of faded cloth and intention, are 3 things. A scroll in Syriac, a leaf of gold-beaten paper with Persian poetry shaped like a peacock, and a book, small, bound in cracked leather, with Zabur scratched faintly into the spine. The Psalms, in Arabic. You press your thumb gently to the page. This is the book that crossed borders. Not with armies, not with kings, but with scribes and merchants and wandering souls who believed that words, true words, should never be confined by walls or creeds or even alphabets. You're not surprised anymore to see it here. In Iran, this land is layered like an onion, Elamite beneath Persian, Zoroastrian beneath Christian, Christian beneath Muslim, and through it all, scripture threads like myrrh smoke through a cracked dome. You walk outside into a courtyard soaked in early light. Pigeons flap their wings from the tiled dome above, scattering the quiet. A young man sweeps with a date palm broom, humming a melody that has the cadence of a psalm but the softness of a lullaby. He sees you and says, "Peace be upon you." You reply in kind. Then he adds, "Are you a reader?" You pause, then nod. He leads you to a corner room where the walls are lined with wooden cubbies. Some are filled with Qurans, others with fragments of Christian liturgy, and tucked into a case near the floor, a copy of the Torah in Persian translation, hand-copied, well-worn, pages stiff with use. You pull it gently from its shelf. A note is scribbled inside the front cover. For those who seek the same God through different windows. The fringe detail? Persian Jewish communities have existed for over 2.500 years. And in many of their homes, especially in cities like Isfahan, Shiraz, and Yazd, the Tanakh has long coexisted with Persian poetry. Psalms translated into rhymed verse. Proverbs quoted in Zoroastrian parables. Esther retold beside Nowruz fire pits. You sit cross-legged on a cool tile floor and read for what feels like hours. A woman in a long chador brings you a cup of saffron tea, sets it beside you with a nod, and returns to her corner. She's reading too, from a book you can't see, but you recognize the sound of it. A litany, maybe a lament, maybe a psalm. You reflect on how these texts, once spoken by prophets in deserts, have now taken on new shapes. How Paul's letters became Silk Road whispers. How Daniel's dreams folded into Persian apocalyptic imagination. How Isaiah's comfort found echo in Shia sorrow. And how, even today, the words haven't died. They've traveled, adapted, lingered. You walk outside as the sun rises higher, washing the sky in pale blue. In the courtyard, a boy scribbles words in the dust with a stick. In the beginning. His father sees, and doesn't correct him. He just smiles and says, "Write it again." So the boy does. And as he writes, you finally understand. The Bible is not a possession. It's not even a single book. It's a trail of footprints across time and empire. Some deep, some barely visible, but always moving forward. Just as your knees begin to stiffen again. Just as you're ready to rest. Someone approaches from the south gate. A traveler, a pilgrim. He carries a book wrapped in dark cloth. And he says, "Have you heard the stories of the prophets in the mountain towns?" You smile. Because of course you haven't. Not yet. The mountains rise slowly, as if built not by geology but by song. Their ridges ripple with cedar and cypress. Their peaks dusted in snow that glows pink in the morning sun. You follow a narrow trail that curves upward like script unfurling across the spine of the earth. With every step, the air thins and sharpens. Your breath grows audible. Your knees protest again. Familiar companions now. And your mind? It drifts. To voices. To verses. To the long echo of prophets who once climbed hills not unlike these to hear God in silence. Not thunder. The pilgrim beside you walks with quiet ease. He doesn't say much, just hums. A wordless tune you don't know but feel like you've heard before. On his back, the book remains wrapped in dark cloth. A treasure? A relic? Or simply a reminder? The villages here are fewer now. Smaller. Houses clustered like barn swallows. Walls built from the same stone they rest upon. You pass one home with a small alcove dug into its side. And inside, candles, a cross, a fragment of a scroll too faded to read. A woman sweeps the step outside and nods politely. "Peace to you," she says in Persian, then again in Syriac. In another hamlet, you find an old man pressing clay tablets with a wooden stylus, not cuneiform. But something else, he explains, half in jest. For the day they forget how to read their screens. You smile, and take a tablet. Further up, in a village clinging to a cliff edge, a church bell rings, or something like it. You follow the sound into a simple chapel where 4 people sit in a circle. Chanting. No priest, no sermon, just scripture read aloud, in Farsi, in whispers. One of them looks up and says, "We have one gospel, and many roads." They offer you tea, always tea, and then the eldest of them places a hand on your book satchel and says, "You carry it well." You don't ask what she means. You just nod. That evening, you camp near a small shrine built beside a glacial stream. Your fire crackles softly. The stars are fierce and close, like needles sewing light into the black velvet of the sky. You open your book. The leather cover creaks. The pages flutter like wings. Inside, Familiar lines. The voice of one calling in the wilderness. Let justice roll like a river. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And there, in the margin, written in an unknown hand, in a language you barely know. All of this has been said before, but not by you. The fringe detail? Persian Christian manuscripts sometimes contain marginal notes, folk glosses, even poetry added centuries later by scribes who weren't copying mechanically, they were responding, interacting, adding their voice to the chorus. You sit longer by the fire. The pilgrim has fallen asleep beside you, his face soft, his breath steady. You watch the flames rise, then lower. Sparks drift upward like forgotten syllables. And you think of the people who walked before you. Abraham, heading east with nothing but a promise. Esther, risking silence in the courts of power. Cyrus, issuing decrees that echoed through time. Daniel, staring down beasts both literal and symbolic. Tobit, guided by angels and little dogs. The Magi, scanning stars for meaning. Paul, dreaming of distant tongues. The scribes who copied. The traders who carried. The children who listened. And Persia, always Persia, where all of it converged, collided, coexisted, where scripture didn't just survive. It became native. You lie back, the earth cold beneath your spine but steady. Your hands relax into the linen. The scent of wood smoke fades. The last words you hear are from your own mouth, whispering to no one. Your word is a lamp unto my feet. And it is, even here, especially here, and now, as your breath slows and your eyelids grow heavier. Let it all soften. Let the mountains flatten into gentle hills. Let the cracked scrolls roll themselves up and rest. Let the whispers of prophets fade into the rustle of dry leaves and distant streams. You've traveled far tonight, not just in distance, but in time, through deserts and thrones, through exiles and returns, through verses once whispered by firelight and copied by trembling hands in stone-walled rooms. Maybe your feet are sore, maybe your mind is full, but your heart, it carries something now, a quiet understanding that the Bible isn't just a book to be read, it's a path walked by countless feet before yours. And Persia? It wasn't just a backdrop. It was a cradle, a corridor, a keeper of verses dressed in different robes, spoken in different tongues, sung beside different fires, but always pointing to something sacred, something shared. So tonight, as you settle deeper into your bed, wherever you are in the world, let your body grow heavy. Let your thoughts grow slow. And let the stories wrap around you like the oldest kind of blanket, one woven from memory, belief, and the soft persistence of truth that refuses to stay still. The stars are out, the scrolls are quiet, and you, gentle traveler, are home.